Fans, take a look at this. Can you believe that? Perhaps even, let's compare it to the size of my head. Andre,
Unfortunately, when you're a wrestler, deformities are more common than you would think. The consequences of spending your entire wrestling career usually leads to some kind of injury and can sadly lead to body deformity. But that doesn't just mean that those who have had a body deformity at birth are exempt from getting into the wrestling world. Several names on this forthcoming list were born with a body deformity and they didn't let it hold them back in their quest to become a professional wrestler. But who were these wrestlers? Well, join us now as we look at 10 wrestlers who suffered with illnesses and body deformities. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos and follow us on Facebook for exclusive lists. Number 1. Brock Lesnar. Have you ever noticed that Brock Lesnar's right ear looks slightly different? Well, that's because Lesnar has something called cauliflower ear. It's actually really common with pro fighters and amateur wrestlers. A cauliflower ear simply refers to a collection of pooled blood collected under the skin, and sometimes it can lead to permanent disfigurement. It can come from a result of direct trauma to the ear, as the outer ear is made up of cartilage. If the ear is injured, it can tear easily, leading to the infection. Once this occurs, fibrous tissues form around the area, thus creating the cauliflower ear as seen on Lesnar. Number 2. The French Angel. Many wrestling fans may not be familiar with the name Maurice Tillet. He was actually a French wrestler in the 50s who was known as the French Angel. His entire character was that he was the ugliest man in the world. These looks came from a deformity he suffered called acromegaly, which causes the bones to overgrow and thicken. He wasn't the biggest wrestler in the world as he stood up 5'7" tall, but his head and hands were extremely disproportionate to the rest of his body. Promoters in France heavily marketed Tillet's deformity, and they marketed him as someone as completely unstoppable. He was even at one stage the AWA World Champion and kept hold of it for over 2 years. He was also the inspiration behind the character Shrek. Number 3. Giant Gonzales. Wrestling fans often mock Giant Gonzales for being one of the worst wrestlers of all time. However, the majority of the blame fall on the fact that Gonzales suffered from gigantism. When Gonzales was 14 years old, he was already 6'4" and would continue to grow until he hit 7'7". This height managed to get Gonzales into playing pro basketball before he tried pro wrestling in the early 90s. Fans most know Gonzales for the terrible match he had with The Undertaker at Wrestlemania 9. Moreover, they remember the horrendous bodysuit that Gonzales was forced to wear as his attire.
Who is that?
Sadly, by 1995, Gonzales' body was failing him and he was forced to retire. He would later be confined to a wheelchair and would unfortunately pass away in 2010 from heart complications. Number 4. Tracy Brooks. Tracy Brooks is an example of someone who was born with a deformity but never let it hold them back from living their dreams of becoming a professional wrestler. Now, if you aren't familiar with Tracy Brooks, she was a mainstay in TNA for over 10 years and was the manager of Bobby Roode and would even be an official member of the Main Event Mafia stable that was beloved by so many TNA fans. Now, Brooks was born with Erb's palsy. This is a birth defect which impacts the arm muscles. Now, Brooks is unable to straighten or turn over her arms. This naturally makes it extremely hard for her to take a bump in the traditional way, but Brooks herself has admitted the main issue during matches was that she couldn't extend her arm during tag team matches. Brooks told the Chicago Sun-Times, "I was one out of 6 kids with this condition at the time, and the only one to benefit in a positive manner due to Mom's persistence, dedication, and the fact she exercised me every day." She also mentioned that this can be an issue in the ring. "I've been wrestling for 9 years now, and if you're wondering, yes, it does affect me in the ring, both physically and mentally. We are in a very cosmetic business in which the focus is on looks, body, and physicality. For someone such as myself that is portrayed as a superstar, this is difficult. In my mind, I am just a girl with a disability and not perfect like we are perceived." Number 5. Paul Orndorff. Now, most wrestling fans best know Paul Orndorff for his role in the first ever main event of WrestleMania. However, Orndorff had a very successful career that earned him a place in the WWE Hall of Fame in 2005. Now, although Orndorff was no doubt a legendary name in the world of wrestling, his star could have shined even brighter if a devastating injury didn't hold him back. Orndorff suffered severe nerve damage during his career, which resulted in his arm not being able to grow, and then this affected the entire right side of his body, making wrestling virtually impossible for the Hall of Famer. Orndorff would comment in a 2010 interview with AOL that the injury occurred because of him pushing himself too much. He mentioned, "Being a perfectionist and trying to be the best there is, that's what I was striving for every day. I would try to better myself and get on myself if I didn't. I pushed myself a lot, more than I should have. I gave more to the business than most did. That's the way I was. I wanted to be the best, and I wanted to be recognized as the best." Number 6. Hornswoggle. There aren't many better success stories in wrestling than the story of Hornswoggle. He had a decade-long WWE run, which is a success for anyone, never mind an individual with dwarfism. Hornswoggle would join the WWE in 2006 as Fit Finley's Leprechaun.
What the hell are you? What the hell is that? What is it?
He would then go on to be involved in some of the most infamous angles in WWE history, including him being Vince McMahon's son and him being the last ever Cruiserweight champion. Hornswoggle would reveal in a 2013 interview that he actually prefers to be called a midget rather than a dwarf. He stated, "That's fully what I am. If you put a little person wrestler on a poster, people are going to say, 'Oh, is that kids? Is that weird, odd people?' You put midget wrestling, they know what it is. I'm technically not a midget. I'm a dwarf or a little person, but I consider myself a midget. I just don't care enough I'm not going to waste anger on the word midget." Number 7. The Big Show. The Big Show, without question, is one of the most successful giants in the history of pro wrestling. Having made his WCW debut in '95 and then joining WWE in '99, Big Show has attained a successful career that has included multiple world title reigns and main event spotlight for 20 years.
Here is your winner and the new World Heavyweight Champion.
This career path could have been drastically different for Big Show, as he suffers from acromegaly, and by the time he was 12 years old, he was already above 6 foot. When Show was 19, he had to have a life-changing operation that would in theory stop him growing, saving his life in the process. Show revealed years later what the surgery involved. They have to go in, chip out that little pocket of bone with a laser, cut the tumor and hopefully not damage the pituitary gland, because the pituitary gland runs so many senses: your eye moisture, tear ducts, nasal passages, and your testosterone. It's like a governor for so many things in your body that surgery sometimes, if not done properly, can damage other things, so then you're on medication the rest of your life just trying to be normal. So I got really lucky and everything turned out. One of the bad side effects to acromegaly is it leads to diabetes, and a lot of things if not corrected, so I got lucky with it. I still have to pay attention to it. Number 8. Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant is probably the most famous big man of all time, but unfortunately, what led to his tremendous success also led to his downfall. Andre, like numerous big men over the years, suffered from acromegaly, which we mentioned can cause gigantism. He discovered this when he was only 14 and continued to grow, which resulted in enlarged head, hands, and feet. He would wear a size 22 shoe, and a regular beer in his hands would seem like a miniature. Andre would be very open with how his size made life extremely hard for him. He once stated, "They don't build anything for a giant." Andre and other wrestling legends have shared stories about Andre being unable to use a telephone because his hands were too big, and there were even stories that he couldn't fit into an airplane toilet, so he was forced to relieve himself in a bucket. In 1993, Andre's body gave out on him and he passed away in his sleep from heart failure at the age of 46. Number 9. Kerry Von Erich. The majority of wrestling fans are aware of only one wrestler who was an amputee, that individual being Zach Gowen, who had a run in the WWE during the Ruthless Aggression era. However, Kerry Von Erich also became an amputee during his wrestling career and amazingly continued to wrestle at a top level. Von Erich was involved in a serious motorcycle crash in 1986 and suffered a dislocated hip and seriously injured his right leg. Sadly, Von Erich's foot was also injured in the wreck and doctors were unable to save the foot, meaning it had to be amputated. Von Erich attempted to keep it a secret from fellow wrestlers and fans, and he would reportedly shower with his boots on so people didn't become aware that he had in fact a prosthetic foot. Judging by his in-ring ability, you wouldn't have been able to tell. And number 10. The Great Khali. The The great Khali attained success solely based on his size, but unfortunately for Khali, it was his size that almost killed a former world champion. On July 29, 2012, Khali underwent surgery to remove a tumor that was caused by his huge size. The tumor developed on Khali's pituitary gland, which is a small gland on the base of the brain that is responsible for the growth of the body. If the tumor wasn't treated, it would have been fatal for Khali. Despite the surgery, Khali is still in great risk of further health problems. Issues such as diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease are all potential concerns. Shockingly, it was revealed during the time of Khali's surgery that the WWE somehow had no idea that Khali suffered from acromegaly, this despite Khali being one of their largest ever wrestlers. WWE were pressured to release a statement as to why they had no idea concerning Khali's condition. The statement read, "As part of WWE's ongoing wellness evaluation, we are happy that the great Khali, aka Dalip Singh, had successful pituitary surgery and we look forward to him returning to the ring in the near future." But there you have it guys, 10 wrestlers who suffered with illnesses and body deformities. Be sure to leave your comments down below, subscribe if you haven't already, follow us on Instagram and Facebook for exclusive lists, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.